guys! So we are well into September. In fact, October is almost here, which means that it's about time I did my annual autumn reading recommendations video. I've done one of these the past couple of years. I've really enjoyed it. It's an opportunity to recommend books I think match the autumn-fall season when it's getting a little bit colder, the nights are getting longer, perhaps you're looking for something spooky to read in October, or just like all of the themes attached to autumnal reads. So with that in mind, I'm going to recommend to you 10 books I think would make excellent autumn reads, and of course if you're looking for more recommendations I will link my previous year's videos down below. Without further ado, let's get into the books. First up is the 13th Tale by Diane Setterfield. This is a book I read this year and it has been one of my favourite books of the year. 5 out of 5 stars. Adored it, and I even have plans to read another book by Diane Setterfield myself this autumn. Now the 13th Tale is told in two timelines. In the first timeline we follow a young woman who works for her father's antiquarian bookshop, and on the side is an amateur biographer. She is contacted by this famous beloved author who nobody really knows anything about because she constantly tells people different stories of her life, but it has come time where she wants to tell the real story, and she has chosen this woman to be the biographer of her true story and who she really is and where she comes from and her background and her history. So our protagonist travels out to this author's home in order to take notes from her recollections and write this biography. So we follow the biographer as well as the author's childhood and early years growing up in quite a mysterious, dark backdrop. Obviously I don't want to give too much away because the steady unravelling of this woman's life is what this book is all about, and it has done masterfully. Such a well crafted story where there is the perfect balance between both the timelines. They're both intriguing and interesting, and you always have enough information and enough clues to keep you guessing and sort of predicting the next little step, but never really to see what is going to come at the end of the story, so you're constantly wondering, and I loved that. I thought it was beautifully written, and I cannot wait to read more by this author. But for those of you who haven't checked out Diane Setterfield, this is one that I would highly recommend this autumn. For something a little bit more creepy, I have a literary horror book that I've mentioned a few times on my channel this year because again it's a book that I've really enjoyed recently, and that is Sealed by Naomi Booth. This is a near future apocalyptic story where there is an endemic spreading the planet that causes people's skin to seal over their orifices. So their nostrils might seal over, their mouth might seal over, their ears might seal over, and obviously that can be incredibly dangerous because it can prevent you from breathing. And at first the medical system seems to be coping with it. There's treatments to get the extra skin removed, and then there doesn't seem to be a continuing problem. However, you have to have the money to be able to afford it. And we follow one woman in particular who has recently fallen pregnant with her on and off, again, boyfriend, and they've decided to stay together and have this baby. And because of her paranoia surrounding this endemic, they have moved to a sort of rural rundown cottage to start afresh outside of the city where everyone believes it's more polluted and you run the risk of more likely picking up these diseases. However, nothing is what it seems when they get out there to this rural town. It seems like things might actually be worse than most people have believed, and that just encourages our main character's paranoia, which also then ties itself up in her feelings about becoming a mother. Again, I would class this as literary horror. It's beautifully written. It deals with quite contemporary themes surrounding motherhood and relationships, and also just like sort of feelings towards pregnancy with this kind of science fiction apocalyptic backdrop, and it's so dark and creepy. Like, I felt so unnerved whilst reading this book, but in the best possible way. Something completely different, however, something that would not be classified as horror or mystery, but instead is a romance novel that I think would be perfect for the autumn, is Romancing the Duke by Tessa Dare. This is the first in one of Tessa Dare's series, so an excellent place to start, and it is quite different from the other Tessa Dare books that I've read in that it has more of like a gothic feel to it. So we're in the 1800s and we follow a woman in her late 20s whose father wrote this really famous episodic serialized fairy tale that was published in magazines. Her father's now dead, however, and he actually left her completely destitute. She didn't inherit anything, and she kind of has to survive on the kindness of others until she was contacted by a lawyer who informs her that she has inherited a castle from her godfather. So her godfather bought her a castle, partially because of these stories that her father wrote, where a princess lives in the castle and people sort of like to pander to this fairy tale notion that she is this little girl from the story, and they buy her the castle, etc, etc, not really treating her like an adult woman with her own personality. However, she's got to take what she can get, so she travels to this castle where it turns out there is a duke in residence, as he was in an accident a few months ago that left him blind, and he had no idea that his castle had been sold. Something suspicious seems to be going on, and they sort of join forces to find out what has happened. How has this castle been sort of sold from under his nose? And they obviously build this relationship. They see each other in a way nobody else sees the other one, and it is like just wonderful romantic delights. And I think because of that backdrop of the kind of eerie castle, this like mystery element, it has quite an autumnal vibe to it. But for a few short and sweet ones, I do have a couple of graphic novels. The first one is Mooncakes, which is a wonderful graphic novel with non-binary representation as well as various ethnicity representation, and it follows a witch and a werewolf, the witch being a young woman and the werewolf being the non-binary character, who grew up together but haven't seen one another in quite a few years, until a weird, mysterious spirit presence appears in the witch's town, and the werewolf also reappears, and they rekindle their friendship, which then develops into a very cute romance, whilst they have to kind of solve the mystery of what is going on in their town, what magical danger is afoot, and what role they have to play in it. Is just incredibly adorable. I think if you like comic books like Moonstruck, then you will really enjoy Mooncakes. Really, really cute, really enjoyable, and like a complete story arc in one volume, so not something you have to commit yourself into for the long run, which I kind of prefer. And then we have a little bit of a darker story, and that is When I Arrived in the Castle by Emily Carroll. Emily Carroll is one of my favourite illustrators and graphic novelists. She writes and illustrates the most beautiful yet unnervingly creepy fairy tale stories, and I think I've mentioned some of her books in videos like this before, but this is her most recent graphic novel. It is a standalone, and it opens with this cat woman. So she's a woman, but she has cat ears and like cat features, who has turned up on the doorstep of this eerie castle where this other strange, beautiful, spirit-like woman lives, and there seems to be something sinister going on. However, they also seems to have a history, because as soon as she arrives, this other woman's like, so you've come back, or so you've arrived at the castle, so you've come to see me. And it's very surreal, it's very abstract, it draws on fairy tale themes, and it's very dark. It has a beautiful colour palette of reds and blacks and whites, and it is kind of gory in places, but also just incredibly beautiful. This is one where I can't say much about the plot, because like I said, it is quite surreal and abstract, and it's kind of within the eye of the reader what's going on, but it is completely captivating, and I love Emily Carroll's work, so would highly recommend it in general. I then want to recommend a standalone fantasy novel to you, and that is An Enchantment of Ravens by Margaret Rogerson. Now, it will quickly become apparent why I've picked this one for autumn, but what this story is all about is a young woman. I seem to be saying that a lot, but yes, our protagonist is a young woman who lives in a fictional fantasy historical world where the Fae live alongside the humans. The Fae remain in the fairy realm, however they come into the human world to buy creation and art, because they can't create for themselves. So if they want beautiful dresses, then they have to come to the human world to have them made. And our protagonist is a portrait painter, the most accomplished portrait painter of her generation. So all the Fae come to her for their portraits to be painted. And at the beginning of the novel, she is asked to paint the portrait of the Autumn Prince. So there are 4 different Fae kingdoms: summer, winter, spring and autumn, and the Autumn Prince has come to her to have his portrait painted, and they just get on like a house on fire. You know, they just have complete and utter banter and chemistry, and because of that, Feelings do start to kindle between them, however, relationships between the Fae and mortals are forbidden, so they can't pursue it until she eventually angers the Autumn Prince, because when she completes this portrait of him, what she's done is painted human emotion into his eyes, which all the other Fae see as a weakness. So he is furious at her and makes her come back to the Fae Kingdom with him in order to sort of explain herself to the fairy court and explain that what she did wasn't true and she didn't see human emotion in his eyes, etc, etc, and then that has them embroiled in the world of the Fae, which is very dark and dangerous, and also spending a lot of time alone together. So yes. Next up is a contemporary paranormal mystery called Strange Practice. So this book is the first in the Greta Helsing novels, and they are set in London, which is one of my favourite backdrops, whether it's historically or contemporary. Love books set in London. And this one is all about a GP called Dr. Greta Helsing, who has a very specific skill set in that she treats the paranormal underbelly of London. She herself is a human, however, her father owned her practice before her and it's sort of a family tradition, and therefore she is aware of the existence of like ghouls and vampires and other like strange and creepy monsters living in London who might need medical treatment, and she provides that for them. So a really fun, unique concept. However, like any good paranormal mystery, there is a serial killer on the loose in London, and it seems to be targeting the paranormal subsection that most people don't know exist. So Greta is embroiled in solving this mystery, and her patients seem to be in danger, and it's just a lot of fun. I haven't read the sequels yet, but I plan on picking them up in the future. We do get the answers to the mystery in the first book, but I'm assuming there will be a new adventure in book 2, so I am excited to pick that one up, and I think it has perfect autumnal, October, Halloween vibes. The next book I want to mention is The Furies by Katie Lowe. This book is The Secret History meets the film The Craft. Like, it is a perfect combination of those two things, and if you would like a young adult comparison, I think it is comparable to The Graces in certain ways. It follows teenage protagonists, but I believe it's categorised as adult literary fiction. Regardless, I think this will actually appeal to a wide variety of readers. It is set at an all-girls private school in England where our protagonist has just started attending. Her father and her little sister both passed away recently, and her mother has decided to use the money from the life insurance to send her to this school. And when she's there, she gets sort of welcomed into this clique of 3 other girls and one of their teachers, their art teacher, who has special classes with them after school to learn all about the history of their school, which is tied in with the occult and witch trials, and because of that they become really fascinated and start experimenting with the occult and witchcraft in their personal lives. It feels very contemporary and realistic, and because of that it also really touches on quite hard-hitting and genuine experiences of young people, like grief, as I mentioned. There is an incident of sexual assault in this book, which is something I like to be forewarned about before reading, and equally just fitting in and healthy and unhealthy friendships. So I just thought this book was incredible and perfect for this time of year. Only 2 more recommendations to go though, and the next one is The Seventh Bride by T. Kingfisher. What T. Kingfisher does in her fairy tale retellings, which this is one of, is often amp up the creepiness but also amp up the humour, and she does this wonderful thing where she really combines like unnerving, creepy backdrops with like sarcastic humour, and I really enjoy that combination and the tone of her writing. The Seventh Bride is a retelling of the Bluebeard fairy tale where this rich, mysterious man continually takes new young wives, and we follow the latest of his young wives when she moves into his house. And unlike the traditional Bluebeard fairy tale, all the other wives are out there in the open, also living in what turns out to be a magical prison basically, because she cannot leave or escape, and they are all there for some nefarious purpose that this Bluebeard character has brought them for. And like I said, it combines that creepy factor with a little bit of humour. It also doesn't romanticise the fairy tale, so if you don't like romantic fantasy or romantic fairy tale retellings, that is not what this book is. It is solely focused on our female protagonist and becoming the brave young woman that she was always meant to be. And last but certainly not least is Perfectly Preventable Deaths by Deirdre Sullivan. This book is perfect for fans of The Devouring Grey or Saw Kill Girls, which are 2 books that I just hear talked about a little bit more frequently, so I wanted to recommend this one in particular. particular. It is a young adult paranormal mystery fantasy novel with a queer main character. So one of the major themes of this book is our protagonist coming to terms with her sexuality, but set in the backdrop of like rural Ireland in a new town that she's moved to with her twin and her mother to live with her new stepfather, and there appears to be some dark magic at play in this town which she is trying to uncover, as well as tap into her own skill as a potential witch. I think a bit like Saw Kill Girls, what this one manages to do is explore kind of contemporary feminist issues, contemporary misogyny, and the treatment of young girls and women in general by society through this kind of paranormal backdrop, and it escalates as the book goes on and ends up being pretty freaking creepy by the end, let me tell you. But I think it's all done to great effect, and we just generally highly recommend this one. But those are my 10 books I would recommend reading this autumn. Of course, like I mentioned, I will link my previous autumnal book recommendation videos in the description box down below, and I would love to hear from you what books you think would make excellent autumn reads. Until next time, happy reading, and I'll see you all again soon. Bye guys!